Good afternoon, everybody. I am Betsy Ludwig. I'm the Executive Director of Women's Entrepreneurship here at Northeastern University. And today is our 8th Miles program. These are masterclasses in innovation, leadership, and entrepreneurship that we've developed to help highlight our community and alumni who are doing very interesting things in the world. And so today we have a fascinating discussion in all things FinTech about how the COVID crisis is creating opportunities and what opportunities there might be in the world. We're going to have a perspective on the global landscape. We're also going to have a perspective from the New England and Boston area landscape. We're going to talk about diversity and really the power that resides in diversity on building a resilient future. So without further ado, we have Susanne Hannestad with us from her home in Oslo. We're very lucky to have her today. She's a powerhouse in the fintech industry and has started Fintech Mundi. She is an MBA from the class of '92. We also have Sarah Biller, who is the founder of Sandbox, and I'll let them all introduce themselves later. And then they're going to be, after their presentations, we're going to be joined by Mark Bernfeld, who's a professor of FinTech, and Julia McCarthy, who is a newly minted 2020 Northeastern alum. Julia founded the FinTech initiative Disrupt. She also won the award from Poets and Quants this year, the best and brightest undergraduate business school graduates. So congratulations to Julia on that. So after they do their Q&A, we will have a brief introduction from the Disrupt students. Mohammed will give us a quick overview for those who are on campus and want to get more involved, or for those of you who are alumni who want to get involved and help the students learn. That would be great. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Julia McCarthy, and welcome Julia and welcome everyone.
Thank you, Betsy. I'm Julia McCarthy. Like Betsy said, I was the former president and co-founder of Disrupt, the FinTech initiative at Northeastern. I studied finance and just graduated, so now I'm an alumna, so it's exciting. And I'd love to introduce our two speakers today, Sarah and Susanne. These are two of the leading ladies of FinTech in the world, and two women that I really look up to. So Sarah, why don't you start and give a brief introduction to yourself, and then you can share your slides.
Wonderful, Julia, thank you. I listened to Betsy with great love that she noted that Susanne is a graduate of Northeastern and truly an accomplished woman globally. And I thought to myself, well, I'm part of the Northeastern family too. I've been so welcomed time and time again by Mark and you, Julia, and Betsy onto campus. And I do teach at another graduate school at another school just across town, not to be mentioned here because we know Northeastern's the best in their FinTech curriculum. But I'm also not only have been in the academic setting, but I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an investor. I also have had the privilege of being an industry executive in this current cycle of FinTech innovation. I'm currently the executive director of Vantage Ventures. And we are a venture firm really focused on driving entrepreneurship and solving for challenges of economic disparity across the country. And also keep my hat in the FinTech world. I'm the co-founder of the FinTech Sandbox in Boston, the co-founder of Capital Market Exchange, a predictive analytics platform for institutional bond investors. More recently was the Chief Operating Officer for Innovation and head of the Innovation Ventures team at State Street. So really kind of keep myself busy and just thrilled to have a chance to learn from everybody today and talk about FinTech. I did think I would set us up very quickly with just a short look at the transformation of FinTech, knowing that as Susanne is going to take us to a global perspective, there's no question today, just to kind of set the stage for our conversation, that we are in a period of digital transformation. And it's a very pedestrian way the industry has looked at transformation. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but it is like other industries. We're applying technology to improve our processes, really introduce new markets and reach create new products and reach new markets. But I don't think that that's what we're going to talk about today. I think Betsy set us up to talk about what does tomorrow look like, particularly as you learned last week about the impact on healthcare. Certainly COVID-19 is impacting the financial services and fintech industry. And as that entrepreneur and as that partner to the startup community, I think we care a lot, and we want to impress upon you that there is this day after tomorrow. So really advancing us past digital transformation. And I would argue in my experiences that tomorrow is already here. We see, you know, way back in time, the banking industry began in the 18th century in Babylon. And it took us a long time to move out of those kind of closed walls of the traditional bank into an environment that we are more typically associating with the advancement of fintech. And that's the use of open banking, enabling innovation to sit on top of it. And it was just a very short time period, if you look at that spread of 2,000 years, to where we began seeing the fully use of digitalization take place, the cross-border, in this case, buying and selling of digital securities, which I wanted to use as my example, because it speaks to another thematic that I think fintech is advancing more rapidly than we realize. And that's the notional idea that we will move rapidly and have moved out of, again, that centralized financial services space that we're so in tune with and used to one that is decentralized. And by that, I mean that the future of financial services is beginning to open itself up in more acute ways you probably see in your own lives. For instance, lending, moving out of the traditional financial services sector and into more active peer-to-peer lending. But the technology also lets us go into an environment for the future of financial services that is more transparent. It becomes contactless. You've probably seen that in your own experiences during the COVID-19 pandemic, where you show up at your local drive-thru and they don't want you to use your credit card, they want you to point your phone. I traveled on the Pennsylvania Turnpike where there's no cash being taken. It was just a straight through. Even if I didn't have a transponder, they were moving people through and extracting payment later. That's what we mean by contactless. And that is a trend that I think we can expect to continue because of fintech. It's critical that we see financial services as moving past a one-size-fits-all industry. Fintech is enabling us to act in a very hyper-personalized way, if you will, moving from a mutual fund construct to one where everyone has their own personalized financial models. By what I just told you, I'm going to hypothesize today with Susanne, we're going to see things, and Julia and Mark, be far less friction-filled and systematically arbitrated. That's a very important component of the future of financial services. It leads us, again, if you believe what I just told you about contactless, the elimination of cash. And of course, we're beginning to enter into an environment in financial services where the execution is done not just rotely by a machine, but it's done smartly because of the overlay of AI and other machine learning techniques. So I think we'll talk a little bit today about this future. We'll talk about it impacting most stakeholders, I hope, Julia, Susanne, and Mark. And then lastly, I want us to touch on what everyone on this call, your future in financial services, because we want to dispel the myth that fintech really is just for coders. Fintech has a role in really advancing all of our goals in society. It has ceased to become be that vertical and has moved horizontally into other industries. So I might reference this slide back, Julia, in our conversations, but I'll lift up there and tell you how excited I am to be part of today's discussion of the Masterclass.
Thank you, Sarah. That was amazing. Susanne, why don't you introduce yourself now?
Thank you, Julia. I'm so happy to be part of Northeastern here, and thank you very much to Betsy bringing me in here. I worked with fintechs for the last 10 years. That was before fintech was a word. And then I also worked 10 years in Nordea, which is the largest bank in the Nordic, building up the card business across the 9 countries, Nordic, the Baltic, Poland, Russia, to mention a few of those countries. Very happy to take my MBA at Northeastern, and I very much look forward to come back to the campus. I'm the CEO of Fintech Mundi. I'm based in Oslo. We have people in London and a South African that is leading that office. We have a Brit that is down in Tel Aviv, and we have an Irish person in Dublin. So we cover the world, and of course starting with Europe. And then I've been with quite a few fintechs over the years. Swipe was my first. So I was first the chairman and then the executive chairman. So we took that from proof of concept to an IPO. So this is a lucky company that is having their R&D in Denver and then sales offices throughout the world except Africa. Another one, Pair, starting with a slide and then ending up with an exit with an M&A, buying up this company early this year. And then we have a third one that I'm currently a board director. They are located in Sweden, and they are taking their business over to India. And India is probably the country in the world that is excelling the fastest when it comes to fintech. I'm a chairman of a few fintechs in the Nordics, and then board director of several global financial service companies. We do write reports. I'm going to come back to that. I'm a speaker, and then also run a few events, and have a large passion for financial inclusion. So we're also going to come back to that. I'm a private investor and travel a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanne. Did you want to share your slides now? Or
yeah, I can go to Jerry, so now we go more into the hang on. We have a report that is called the Global FinTech Index. And this is something we launched in December. US is ranking as number 1, and the US has been catching up over the years. That was not the state 5 years ago. And then at that time, UK in particular with London did a lot. If you look at the US part here, Stripe, which is an Irish company, they moved over to San Francisco, and quite a few of European companies and some Asian companies, they're moving over to the US and particularly Silicon Valley because of the ecosystem there. I would like to highlight the Nordics, since that's what I'm covering the most, Lithuania at the 4th place. You would imagine such a small country like Lithuania that is able to be on the 4th place there, but they have a fantastic, eager government that is doing everything to make a regulation and have the fintechs come and live and stay of foreigners in there. And another one, Sweden, with Stockholm as the highlight, they have quite a few unicorns. With the Klarna, iSettle, and Anafin. And then we have Estonia, also a small country, but they also have unicorns that mostly has moved over to London, like TransferWise and Revolut. Another interesting index is the cities throughout the world, how that is coping. San Francisco, absolute number 1, but I would like to highlight London, Singapore, Bangalore, Boston is on the 8th place, fantastic, and then Sydney and Hong Kong. Those are cities throughout the world that is fantastic hubs. So this is not necessarily a European thing or a US thing, this is truly a global thing. Then just since I'm coming from the Nordics, I'm highlighting the Nordics here. So this is the European top ranking. So Vilnius, Lithuania is high up, Stockholm is high up, Tallinn from Estonia, and then we have Copenhagen, Helsinki, Oslo, and Riga, Gothenburg. So those were the slides I just wanted to introduce, so we get a feel how it's going on with the fintech around the world. country-wise and city-wise. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanne. Before we dive into our conversation, I'd love to just take a step back and talk about why FinTech is so important and why we should be interested in it. A lot of students are thinking about maybe pursuing a career in FinTech. They're seeing these more and more capital being poured into FinTech, more acquisitions surrounding FinTech. So I would love to hear from both of you why FinTech is so important. Sarah, would you like to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, as I mentioned in my remarks, Joy, it's such a nice question to emphasize again the criticality that FinTech is now playing, not only in financial services to enable us to advance the provisioning of services and new products at scale to segments of the population we may have not historically seen served, which has been a long-standing desire of financial services. It's nothing new that we've tried to reach into unbanked populations or underserved communities. But I think what's so different this time and why it's so critical, particularly to individuals who are thinking about their next generation of their career, is that FinTech has begun to drive outcomes in other industries. We are certainly seeing financial services reap the benefit of innovators, but we're also seeing clear outcomes in the way that our cities are being transformed or our environment has been impacted. I've long been in the capital markets, and I've never seen a more important moment than this day that we lever the use of FinTech, both in the innovation side of it, the way we aggregate data, and more critically, the way we define problems to drive change in the way that our corporations treat the environment. It's true of health. So we could go on and on where FinTech is playing a role, but for me, it is the great driver and perhaps the key solution to some of our society's most intractable problems.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a very promising answer. Susanne, what about you?
FinTech has been a mega trend for quite a few years. I would say 5-6 years already, and they are kicking the legs of financial service, which is a huge industry by far. So the FinTechs, they can either compete with the financial service or they can have banks and financial service as their customers, and both those two things are happening. Everything needs to be digitalized. So that comes with the financial service, which leads into a lot of industry, whether it's the consumer side or the business side. And the banks, they are, or the payments or lending or whatever that's related to financial services is the core of business one way or the other. And what we see more and more now is that the consumer side has been taken care of more and more. You just need to have more spread and access. But the SMEs is probably the runners-up being underserved. So that can be in Europe or US or Africa or emerging market in general, that SMEs are underserved. Generally, banks are cautious, they are risk averse, they don't have system to trust saying yes to lending to these SMEs. So this is and if you have the SMEs to go around, then you can prosper and grow from there.
Awesome. I would encourage everyone to use the chat. So if anything resonates with you, feel free to share your insights. And if there's any questions, we'll try to answer them as we go along. So now I want to transition to today. We're unfortunately living in a devastating global pandemic. We're seeing high unemployment numbers, businesses are struggling, and we've all been working from home for the past few months. So I'd love to get both of your opinion on FinTech's response to this pandemic and maybe any opportunities that are being presented because of this.
I can start. Back to the digitalization and going cashless in particular. That is a trend that is escalating. The Nordics, where I'm living, we haven't been using cash for ages. So we are so accustomed to using non-cash. I would like to use the example of India, where the Prime Minister, he has said that we need to go beyond the cash, because that's Yeah, it's not all the money that is so-called official. So if you can have it digital, then it's much better. Now with the COVID-19, this is escalating even more because cash is perceived filthy in so many ways. Now we're talking the health part of it, and then you have to transition to the digital way of handling cash. So, and that goes in so many aspects, and COVID-19 has been a wake-up call for so many industries to go digital.
Awesome. We just got a question. So let's stop and we can answer that. From Kyle, do you see fintech leading to the end of traditional commercial banking if there are state-based digital currencies replacing traditional cash and fiat currencies?
I can take that, but Susanne and certainly Mark, I'd be interested in your thoughts too, because you know it's a very interesting more in the U.S. and then of course there's a global perspective that Susanne you bring, but certainly in the U.S. as we think about the challenging regulatory environment around our federated banking system, just alone that governs and regulates our community banks. When you start adding on top of that unique currencies that are state-based, we saw some of the challenges that presented in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s with states printing their own currency and their treasury notes, and actually the devaluation followed by hyperinflation during times of war and strife. And so I don't think I necessarily see state-run treasuries on the horizon yet, but I do see a digitization of fiat currencies. And Susanne has mentioned to you already that that's happening in her part of the globe and certainly in other places, including just little areas like the Marshall Islands, just fully digitize their fiat currency. So I do think it's coming, but I don't think it's at the level of states, and perhaps that's not the nature of your question, but I don't think states are going to issue their own currency. But I'll footnote that by saying that we do have the ability to begin to fractionalize digital assets that represent stores of value in much more minute ways. And that begins to create access for the everyday individual to institutional level investing strategies and otherwise that we have not seen before. And so I think it's very promising that you asked that question about community banks, and then I just added to it by extension other segments of financial services that will benefit. But Mark, Susanne?
E-currency or cryptocurrency or whatever we called it, that is on agenda on the federal level in many countries. Sweden is probably one of the countries in the world that had come the farthest in setting up. So they are piloting these days to see how this is working. The big challenge is regulation. How do you regulate e-currency? Across, one thing is in one nation, but across the nation. And who, if one, should be the global federal bank in this aspect? There's a technical issue, which is minor because the technology can be done. It's more the regulation part, I think, is going to be cumbersome. And then you have to comply and all these things after. But it will come one way or the other. I don't know how it's going to turn out.
Julia, can I add to that briefly?
Of course.
I think those were great answers. I think the reason for regulation is that financial services is unique among sectors in that it requires trust because some people are handing their money off to other people. And trust is a hard thing to come by, so regulation has been the substitute for trust. And I think that while technology can take the place of regulation, the trust in that technology to do so will be very slow. And as a result, the regulation is going to kind of slow change for a while, but not stop.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, yeah. I do sense though, Mark, honestly, that we're beginning, as a generational shift happens, the trust in digitization far more rapidly than what we've seen in the past. I recently got a note from an entrepreneur that I value very much, and she signed the note in blockchain I trust. And I thought that was a very interesting play on words, to sense that changing dynamic, as opposed to our currency, which of course says, in God I trust. So anyway.
So I agree. I just think if you look at the pace of change in pure tech, it's very fast, and it will take longer to create that level of change in financial services, but we're going to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely, and then one always have to look at what kind of value is e-currency contributing compared to other things or functionality. And Sarah, you mentioned open banking as something that is coming, and it's coming big time. You might know that the EU has harmonized regulation when it comes to open banking. It started with the Payments Service Directive 2. And it was made because they wanted to have innovation and kick the legs of the banks, so you can open up and do more. It takes time because perception and so forth, technology is there, but the perception how to implement regulation might vary across the European countries, even though it's the same type of regulation across all the European countries.
Yeah, I do have questions, not necessarily about the open banking movement, but the larger openness of the financial services system. I obviously I think it's coming, and I advocate for a great deal because of the factors you just said, Susanne. But I also wonder, there are so many outstanding questions. Identity is a question as we talk about regulation. Risk pooling as we begin to fractionalize or digitize different assets and push them out to the nodes. These are all questions that present to me, for those of you who are problem solvers, the best reason to come into FinTech, because there's so many questions. The ethical implications of a digital strategy when we know that we don't have universal digital access across society, and certainly literacy, maybe, or lack thereof of financial literacy intersected with digital capabilities, may further disadvantage communities that we're actually all trying to solve for in our efforts in FinTech. So lots of outstanding questions.
Yeah, those were good elements, and just some reflections on ID. Every onboarding needs to make sure that the right person is provided into the right account and getting the lending and so forth. So though it's a lot of technology out there, whether it's straightforward authentication or it's biometrics, and then utilizing biometrics, this is something that can be utilized in those who have low literacy or non-literacy in some other regions or rural regions. So that we have seen both the fingerprints and facials and other eyes and so forth. So that is a good way of utilizing the technology for the better good, both for the security side of it and also for those who are underserved or underbanked throughout the world. And then the risk, also how do you measure risk and how do you credit score and all these things. The old big companies like Experian and others who has world dominance on this area, they have been challenging because of the technology that is coming up. So there's so many fintechs that is going into this more reg tech type of area and risk part of it, which I think is it's a fabulous. I wouldn't think that regulation was sexy, but now it's becoming sexy.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd love to transition. We got another question. That's a great question from Doug, and that is, how will FinTech play a role to accelerate the economy's recovery? Any thoughts on that?
Yes. Technology, also fintechs by norm is just a 10% fraction of the cost like a bank is doing with their IT system. So if you take away 90% of the costs, providing the fintechs with the banking and the trust and all these things, you don't provide trust, you earn trust. but that is coming in, and the digitalization, that you don't need to step into a branch office, you've been taken care of wherever you are, and so forth. This can help the COVID. Several places, the banks, whether they're small or large, are the distribution channels for the, I would say, the coverage of or the help of the money to be fed back either to companies or to consumers. So in that sense, it's a fantastic tool, whether it's an incumbent bank or a niche bank or a neobank or fintechs to it.
And Doug, I might add just some real examples that are happening today in the fintech community to aid in the recovery. One perfect example, or one very good example, is the Federal Reserve banking system introduced, as you probably saw, its funding directly to Main Street. So bypassing the federal window and wanting to put hands or money in the hands of our small business owners. When they made that decision, they didn't go through their traditional channels, as I just noted. They actually partnered with Intuit, who had TurboTax and QuickBooks, because their data was far more accurate than the IRS's, and in other ways to begin to facilitate payments and lending. And so that was an important criteria to create a baseline economic foundation for a lot of our small businesses who otherwise would have not been able to access, obviously, their working capital lines for other means. Another thing that I think, if that's today, you have to think about what we can do tomorrow, and picking up on Susanne's trends. I think we envision a fintech, a future financial services industry informed by fintech, where, for instance, we know individuals at certain segments of the population, they're on sort of like paycheck to paycheck, or if they're even there, they may be missing bill payments and otherwise, in financial distress, even though they're part of the working poor. And so can we use fintech to develop a moment where we say, you no longer have to wait 2 weeks for your paycheck? Why couldn't we deliver you money at the end of your workday that would enable you to, you still have to manage your cash flow, but you have a better chance of not entering into that vicious cycle of financial distress. Fintech, and by extension InsurTech, is already thinking about introducing new episodic insurance capabilities, as well as administering digitally the traditional provisioning of insurance that has to be done in person. And so these are sort of means, if I had to take it from just a traditional sense of how we look at the industry, not that futuristic sense we've been talking about to date, how can we use technology to introduce these products, which are often our first lines of defense for people who are in economic distress. And there's no better time than now, where the economy has deep pockets of course, what look like recessionary, if not depressionary economies. So I'm super excited about fintech. I've not been excited, I don't want to sound tone deaf, about the pandemic, but I am very optimistic that we can help as participants in fintech make people's lives better because of what's been revealed in the pandemic. So I hope no one takes that the wrong way, and if anyone's hurting because of it, we care about you, but this is a great moment in time.
I totally agree, Sarah, and when there's a downturn, there's the biggest opportunity to start innovation and go forward. So the time to excel and accelerate with the innovation and the digitalization is now, and quite a lot has been doing so. Yeah. One of the biggest challenges fintechs are having, taken aside the COVID-19, is funding. We know that the US, London, Europe, Singapore, they are loaded with the financials and funding, and these investors, they are looking for the next big opportunities, and open banking is one of these areas. And I see that this is a good timing for the investors to go in and invest. in these promising fintechs. Just a note on what you said on the insurance side. During the pandemic, how to shrink your coverage, and then with insurance that you pay for only what you're using, like the car insurance or other things that you're using. So you pay mileage rather than paying annual that you're used to do. So all these business models are being put upside down because the technology is much more easily accessible for the tech companies, and they see how they can disrupt such a conservative industry as the insurance industry is.
Awesome, thank you. I would love to transition to talk a little bit about the social impact of fintech. That's something that's really important to me and has kept me interested in fintech. So can you talk about the power of fintech in creating a more inclusive economy and how fintechs are doing that today? Sarah, would you like to start?
Well, I was just going to, I have to say, I was smiling at Susanne because she's living this firsthand. We are too, but Susanne, why don't you take that? Because I know just having read about what you're doing, it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We had a financial inclusion summit a year ago where we invited the world, so it was by invitations, 300 people here in Oslo, Opera House, and we have around 50 fintechs in the Nordics, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and the 3 Baltic states and Iceland. That is only 35 million people that is living there, but they are pumping above their weight. This is the commercial for today. And they have on the ground when it comes to in the emerging market, whether it's Africa, Southeast Asia, or Latin America, concrete on the ground thing. So we are helping them to bridge over because there are regulation, there's a financials, there are all the standard challenges to it. And then we also wrote a report where we interviewed quite a lot of things, and then to look at the challenges and the opportunities for fintechs there. And there's one thing that comes out: collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. That is the key to make sure across the regulations and companies, private companies, and the governmental side, the NGOs, so that they can collaborate much better than they are doing lately. And then one main insight is, of course, mobile money propositions is the mean to serve underbanked or underserved in the rural area. So that's another thing that we saw. If there's 5 things that you can read in the report that I think Betsy is putting out in the message, is that it's design-led thinking, and they make products that are better in every way. That's number 1. Number 2, create a more flexible regulation framework. Number 3, identify ways to enable access that drive usage. And then the 4th one is pursue shares goals and seek collective gains. And then the last one, inspire digital drift. So these are kind of known stuff when you hear it, but it's to execute on it. So that has been. So this report is quite extensive, looking at all these things and see how we can be taken forward. But again, it's collaboration in all aspects.
I think I would take Susanne's list that you just offered us and say those are lessons for all of our lives. As we think about our role, right, in not only just fintech and financial services, but how do we apply that to, Julia, your question about inclusiveness, no matter where we find ourselves. I just couldn't help but think we had this pivotal moment at Boston FinTech Week last year with Peter Hazelhurst, who is the head of Uber Money. And people, but Uber's, for wrong or right, getting a really bad rap culturally in the paper, and there's been lots of questions about where they have a role in society. And one of the things Peter shared with us that was not widely known, and I mean, I find I read incessantly about fintech, not only live it, but tend to absorb it. And I did not know Uber, as a transportation company and as a part of the sharing economy, actually also views its ability to use its balance sheet to drive inclusiveness. And so what Peter shared with us in a moment of just complete candor is that they have drivers who wake up in the morning who have to make a decision between getting in their car and getting gas or buying bread or paying their bill, right? Because these are individuals who are driving because it's oftentimes, it could be their primary source of income, but it also might be their second and third because they're hustlers and they're working to like lift themselves up. And Uber actually has a no questions asked opportunity for drivers. If you don't have the ability that morning to have money to put gas in your tank, they'll give you $50, and you actually can go and across the day you'll pay it back, of course. But you know, that to me is the truest sense of where we are as a society and the application of fintech to drive inclusion. We are enabling people who otherwise may not be able to, you know, work for themselves every day to do something. And so when you ask like, what's fintech's role in inclusion, it is everywhere we look. And so I'm just so thrilled to think that there are people on this call right now who think about problems differently than we do. And they can offer solutions that are unique because, again, I think probably, I mean, Peter is brilliant. And if you all have not followed Uber Money, it's a good read. But I think probably someone brought that solution to him. And so here we have the opportunity with the intersection of understanding financial services and technology in very interesting ways, no matter what industry you're in, to solve for that question of inclusion. And help people reach periods of economic security and mobility and small businesses. So I'm probably more forceful in that point than I need to be, but everybody who's on this call needs to figure out how they can be part of the solution.
Just to give add on to your examples, I have two here. Crunchbase, they are based in the southern part of Sweden, and they have taken their payment solutions over to India, which is not based on Visa or MasterCard or anything like that. But of course, the mobile phone is a key thing to the whole. So they have teamed up with the three of the bigger mobile operators in India, and Modi, the Prime Minister, he says we're going to have digital payment and it's going to be real-time payment. So complying with that and going forward, and with such a huge country like India, that's a good one. Another one is Jamie. It's a Danish company led by a female founder. Charlotte is doing a great job, and she has launched her in Ethiopia. So that was a collaboration with the government in Ethiopia to have savings groups for women. So they have a box which they digitalize, and so they put money up in a box to make sure that this woman, this woman, and this woman can start their business. So they start with small thing, then this SME is escalating, and then I can put more money to help other women to start doing it. And I think this is such a great thing. So they know Jamie, they are escalating over to Kenya, and they're going to have quite a few other countries there. So we work together with the MasterCard Foundation, MasterCard Innovation Lab in Kenya. So it's a lot of help that can be done, even though not everything is based on MasterCard's credit card system.
Yeah.
But again, partnership.
Yes. Susanne, just to augment more locally in Boston, BlackRock has led an initiative called the Emergency Savings Initiative, and it's a large institution, but it's working locally in the Boston area, if any of you are interested, with Commonwealth, which is a not-for-profit, and doing tremendous work, and they're looking for innovative solutions. So if you're an entrepreneur who's interested in improving people's rates of savings and helping them right in our backyard, is a nice group doing that. Yeah.
Another I would like to compliment is the Bill and Gates Foundation. They are doing a great job for financial inclusion. Now they have redirected their money to COVID-19 of obvious reason. But they, with Linda Gates, she's so well known in what financial inclusion and the consequences or the result of how to reach out to women in particular, so they can start their businesses and put the food on the table, and the drunken husband coming back, and the kids are getting their education.
Oh, fun. Yeah.
So we only have time for one more question, but I would love to end on how can we build more diversity within FinTech as a way to build more resilience and the importance of diversity and overcoming bias as we innovate.
I think it's about promoting and mentoring women. I'm very cautious. When a female founder comes to me, I do everything to help her, to introduce the investors, to introduce to potential customers, to partners, and so forth. And when I was at Nordea as an executive there, that was also a thing. So you don't drag up your ladder after you. You make sure you welcome everybody and invite. So that's more to the female part of the audience. In general, when you have a balance in all kinds of diversity, you get value on the bottom line. So the more diverse, the better results you get.
Yeah, I would get interested, Susanne, but I would remind us to go back to our first principles as an industry in financial services, and that is that modern portfolio theory posited that the best investment strategy was diversification. We see that time and time again, and I'm not sure how we couldn't really take those basic tenets that have been so critical in our success and do everything possible to ensure that we continue diversification, not only in our investment strategies, but in our ecosystems and in our adoption of technology, the way we code our models in the future of FinTech. So, Joy, I think your question is important, and hopefully one that we self-answer, that we are all, like Susanne, committed to ensuring everyone comes up on the ladders with us.
Just to give some statistics here on the balance of women's share employment in the financial service. So this is by country. Finland is #1 with 60% women employed. France is #2 with 58%. United States is #3 with 55%. Japan 53%, Australia 53%. Spain 52%, Germany 51%, and the one that is having 50-50 is Norway. Give some ideas. That's on the employment side. If you go to the management and banking leaders, then you have men 82, meaning 18 women, and then FinTech founders, we have 12. So we have some work to do on the FinTech side there. And then we have 59% financial services doesn't pay enough attention to the gender diversity. So it's an industry phenomenon as well. But I think it starts with the founders to help them to come up, because eventually they will be successful ladies one way or the other to it. And I know financial service sector throughout the world, they are doing more and more to get the C-level women, whether it's in the management side or it's in the board thing. And to give an example from Norway, we had, I think it's 15 years ago, the Norwegian government, they said it's going to be 40% female board members. And we are now close to 50-50 men and women in the boardrooms, which is fantastic. So sometimes you need to have a little bit more help than the normal way to increase it.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Sarah and Susanne. You guys have been so inspiring. I'm so hopeful that the future of FinTech is something amazing. Before we wrap up, I'd like to transition over to Mohammed. He leads Disrupt. He is our new president. And he's going to talk a little bit about opportunities to stay engaged within the FinTech community at Northeastern.
Thank you, Julia. And thank you so much, Sarah and Susan, for today. It was an incredible discussion. And thank you, Mark and Betsy, for setting this up. I'm going to share my screen here. I have a quick presentation for you. Okay. So yeah, just a quick introduction on just what we do and what we're about. We're a student-led organization that's focused on, the disruptive power of tech in finance. And we're always looking at different ways to educate and also inspire from incredible, inspiring discussions such as the one we had today with you guys. And always continuing to develop our FinTech network. We've had an outreach of more than 750 students. We have a very diverse and tight-knit team where we're learning constantly from one another and trying to research FinTech and learn more about FinTech and all that you two told us about today, which is amazing. There are different ways to stay involved. And for students, any students that are here, we have a mentorship program, one for, navigating Northeastern and also navigating the workforce as we try to expand our network there. And also for any alumni here, we're always trying to expand our alumni network as we look for either mentors for our navigating the workforce mentorship program, which is very important to us as we try to create this community on campus. And also for employees, we're all constantly looking for job and co-op opportunities as we have access to FinTech talent on campus, people that are very motivated and passionate about FinTech, trying to learn more and find different ways to learn more about it. And that's something we're very passionate about. So just to keep it brief, I would love to, get in touch with anyone who wants to, speak to myself about, FinTech, Disrupt, and how we can continue this on campus. This is my email and also the email for Disrupt, the Northeastern FinTech Initiative. These are the social media platforms that we use and our names. So definitely please follow us, and we definitely want to, stay in touch and, get to know with one another and speak FinTech all the time. So please, if you want to get in touch, please do. And yeah, hope to, I look forward to getting to know each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, and thank you to Julia and Susanne and Sarah and Mark and everyone who was so active in the chat. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions. These hours go by so quickly, but I, for one, am completely inspired by this discussion today to understand that there is so much happening in the world, both to solve these intractable problems, but to bring diversity. Obviously, I represent the Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative, which we've talked about is a perfect intersection between finance, which is underrepresented by women, technology, which is underrepresented by women, and entrepreneurship. So FinTech and finding these solutions is really important to diversity. And Sarah, that comment you made about going back to first principles and portfolio diversification is just such a salient point. It's like, why have I not thought of saying that before? It's so great. And Susanne, the work you're doing up there in the Nordics, I actually just sent Mark a message. I said, we should create a dialogue to bring our students over to the Nordic countries and teach them about FinTech in the Nordics as a field trip. So I was very inspired by today, and you do amazing work. And so I guess, what we've learned today is that solving these big global problems is kind of a role for everybody. It's not just a coding problem. It's not just a business problem. It's not just a finance problem. It takes a lot of raw brain power to make this all happen, and it takes a community. So here we have people like Susanne who graduated, like myself, last century, right? With our new students here who are just now forming these clubs on campus. And so if we can merge together these multidisciplinary and multi-generational approaches to solving these big global problems, I think as a community we can move forward. So we encourage everyone to get involved, whether it is in your own communities, whether it is with Disrupt, with Northeastern, or with Sarah and what she's doing with Sandbox, and the million other interesting things that Sarah does, and Susanne and what she's doing. I think we wanted to mention a couple of things. One is Susanne is creating a global FinTech index that's launching on June 17th. And so she's trying to catalog all fintech companies around the world. And I guess, Susanne, people should just go to your website and sign up for your newsletter or something. I've put a link to the Fintech Mundi website here, but maybe we can put it again. Susanne, is that the best way for people to register their interest?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And then Sarah too, I think, you know, she runs the or not runs, but is part of Boston FinTech Week. And that is a huge thing that's now been moved to March. And so we're looking for thought leaders to come. I think Northeastern is going to want to host a very interesting discussion during that week. I don't know if that's going to be in person or virtual or a combination, but if anyone wants to participate in that, Sarah, do you have any more information on that?
Thank you, Betsy. We have a website, bostonfintechweek.org. And so we encourage everyone to go and sign up. We'll keep you, we won't spam you, but we'll keep you apprised. And Betsy, you mentioned something that's so critical, and that is that Boston FinTech is a grassroots community-led initiative. We're looking at 5,000 people coming into Boston, and we welcome new ideas and new thoughts and individuals to come with new content. That we can ensure that we continue to advance innovation and also make sure that we don't lose sight of some of the key areas that we've talked about today. It is a platform for understanding how FinTech intersects with diversity or other societal challenges. So please do join us.
That's awesome. Thank you. So we're at the top of the hour. So I want to thank everyone for their participation today. I have to plug next week's masterclass. We actually have two next week. We have one which is Inside the Minds of Venture Capitalists, both to hear from the perspective of how to work in venture capital if you're interested, or if you are pitching for investment to understand how they think. So we have two of our alumni who are in venture capital to kind of give you an insider's look. And then on Thursday, we have a really special guest who is the founder of Affectiva, who is trying to humanize technology before technology dehumanizes us. And she has just written a book called Girl Decoded, and she's going to be joined by our dean of our computer science school for a fireside chat, Carla Broadley. And I think that will be a really fascinating discussion to have these two kind of powerhouse women in computer science. So I leave you with that. I hope to see you all next week for our double hitter. It's the finale of our spring mile season that we've kind of created here. And thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. And we'll follow up with an email with some of these links and some resources, and we'll all stay in touch. Thank you so much.